Well, I have 10 o'clock here, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Hello, and welcome to the webinar today. My name is Carrie Berger, and I'm the coordinator for the Northwest Fire Science Consortium. For those of you not familiar with the consortium, we are one of 15 fire science exchange networks that are funded by the Joint Fire Science Program. Part of our mission is to disseminate regionally relevant information to our stakeholders in Oregon and Washington. We try to do this by offering a diversity of opportunities for people to participate in, and hosting webinars is just one way we accomplish that. So to learn more about the consortium or to sign up for our monthly newsletter, visit our webpage at northwestfirescience.org. So to avoid any noise interference, I have muted your audio, so if you have a question, please type it into the chat box. Also, I will be recording the webinar and will archive it on our website and YouTube channel. You can find both those web addresses in the chat window. So it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague Daniel LaBelle. Daniel is currently working with Extension at Oregon State University and is the Forestry and Natural Resource Extension agent in Klamath and Lake counties. Daniel has 50 years of fire experience. 50 years. I tried to write it all down, but I didn't think that I would do it justice, so I've asked Daniel to talk a bit about his background. So I'm going to turn it over to you now, Daniel.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that, and thanks to everyone spending your time on this webinar. We'll try to make it meaningful. I just want to give a perspective based on experience. I'm not an expert on anything, but I feel through this perspective and background that I've become a judge, or at least I think I realize what works and what does not work. And with the issues facing us today, I want to present a potential solution for you. I started in 1969 with my first fire course. It was in the Navy and served in the military, and it was shipboard fires, and I was on a few, and it was a really neat experience. When I got out of the Navy in '73, I had the experience of working in the fire control laboratory in Riverside, California as a grunt tech, a forest aide, if you will, for some of the fire behavior scientists there, and just learned an awful lot. Transferred at the end of '73, '74 to Oregon State University as an undergrad, and starting to raise a family, and worked half-time during the school year as I did my bachelor's, and full-time in the summers for the Managed Forest Watersheds Project under Logan Norris at the research lab there on campus, and learned over the 5 years I worked there, learned an awful lot in watersheds, ecosystems, how things work, the research, and just had a wonderful experience, fisheries and watersheds. And then in '77, I transferred to North Idaho for my first job on a ranger district in a remote ranger district that no longer exists. And we had to do fires, even though I was a forest technician in charge of reforestation, stand exams, and leading crews. I had to do fires. And so I went on my first fire line assignment in '78, and I was there for 3 years and had tremendous experience. We were the Type 1 crew because we could respond where no one else could in the amount of time we had, being so remote. So I cut my teeth on my first fire assignments. We worked all fire season those years, and tremendous experience. And I came out, I started as a line pounder and came out as a crew boss at the end of that season. It just fit, and I had a great time. Transferred to Northeast Oregon, Halfway, Oregon, as a silviculture technician, professional forester in reforestation, TSI, and still did fires and went on fire assignments all over the state of Oregon. Type 2 crews, became a strike team leader, served on Silver Fire, field observer, strike team leader, and earned my my right to be in the fire. We did prescribed burning all those years, and had a great experience. And then I did silvicultural certification and my master's in the late 80s back at Oregon State University in the Fire Science Department in the College of Forestry. And then from there, worked in central Idaho and then transferred to northwest Montana and the Kootenai National Forest in the 90s as a substaff in trying to convert into this new program called ecosystem management. I was an ecologist, a silviculturist, and worked from 92 to 2010 in northwest Montana, fighting fires every year, growing in the fire organization, and silviculture and ecology and forest management all that time, and then ultimately becoming in charge of the vegetation program on the Kootenai National Forest, and got my first, worked my way up to Crew Boss Division Soup and Ops Chief Type 2, which I was for 12 years, and then Incident Commander Type 3 for 12 years, branch director and infrared interpreter, field observer, SIT unit leader, plans chief, trainee, safety officer, the whole works. I essentially had a full-time fire job with my full-time vegetation, silviculture, ecology job. Then I got involved with Fred Sampson and Wendell Hahn up in the regional office, and was part of the Jack Ward Thomas's regional efforts during that time, and then went for a PhD in '97 at the University of Montana, and did a full classification of the Kootenai Forest and looked at disturbance ecology and did all of that, got the PhD in 2000. And then while I was an ops chief and while I did the fires and all of that concurrently, I was blessed with learning while I was doing, starting from the bottom rung and then going all the way as far as I could, retired in 2010. And in the meantime, I was a fire chief for a volunteer fire department in northwest Montana for 6 years, and then transferred here in Klamath Falls to a firefighter EMT for a couple of years when I got here in 2014. So I've been with fire all of those years, and with forest management and ecology, and I was able to put all the pieces together, which made me a better ops chief or a better ecologist or a better forester or a better silviculturist by looking at what worked, what did not work, and how we could do it better. I never succeeded in pulling off landscape efforts the way I would have liked all of those years, and worked as hard as I could to do it. And it wasn't until I got here in Klamath Falls that I heard there was a group of people, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So let me proceed with this PowerPoint. And what I want to do is start off with the first of three great constants in our lives, which of course is fire. And fire isn't evil, it isn't angelic, it's beneficial, and it's detrimental. And I've gone through both. I would not be here if fire didn't save my life in various adventures in the winter and around and on fires, but it almost took my life many times. The second of the three great constants in our lives is this: change. Change is just ahead. We're in the midst of change. The only thing we can count on in this world is that nothing will stay the same. It will always change. Climate change. And I wanted to show you really quick this graph. I don't know if you've seen this before, but it looks at every year since the mid-1800s, since we've been starting to take climatic records, and it goes up and look at over the course of a year from January to December, look at what it's doing on the average temperature year to year to year. The last 5 years have been record hot years. 2018 is now the third or fourth hottest on record. 2014, 15, 16, 17, and 18 have all been the hottest years on record. And ice. You know what's happening with weather patterns, floods. I was stuck in over the past 2 days with the snow is getting too heavy for areas and weighing down trees, broken trees. Weather is changing. Population. Since weather has been taken, we've taken records of weather in the mid-1800s. In the mid-1800s, this country had 50 million people in it. It now has 370 million people, and they are all wanting to live somewhere. And they are building homes in areas that they've never built before to such densities that have never been made before. In Tennessee, Gatlinburg, in Paradise, in Malibu, in Santa Rosa, all building homes, all wanting a place to live, and at densities we've never seen before. And we've also been extremely good at suppressing fire. I know, I've done my best over the years, and we're 98% effective at putting fires out. We have managed our vegetation, forest, brush, and whatever other species to different degrees, sometimes not managing it all, and as a result, forests, west side, east side, shrublands, grasslands, whatever, because of our management and lack of management, have built up densities in the midst of their evolutionary adaptation to change and to disturbance to biomass levels we've never seen before. And this is a change. Structures, buildings, boxes of fuel have changed drastically in densities, in construction, in materials, and these boxes of fuel. And I just wanted to show you this really quick. This is several years ago. Structures, interior structures, when you reach a flash point, that's when that temperature is when an interior structure will reach such a heat it will spontaneously combust everything within that structure. I'm not going to show you this whole video, but when we started responding to fires in the 70s with legacy furniture of real wood, real wool, real cotton, we had 30 minutes before flashover occurred, and this where everything spontaneously combusted. So we got in our bunker gear, responded to the call, and we had 30 minutes to make entry, to make rescue, to put the fire out. But now, with modern room furnishings, and that's what this Underwriters Lab research indicates with modern room furnishings, we now have, because of composites, because of chemical constituents of furnishings and wood and composition, we have 3 minutes. Buildings are now burning with modern furnishings, modern construction, 10 times faster and 8 times hotter than they did in the 70s. Red flag warnings. We're getting more red flag warnings earlier in the season, later in the season. Wind, temperature, and humidity are reaching greater than 80 degrees, 20 miles per hour, and less than 20% humidity more often, and not recovering at night as well as they did when I started in the 70s. It's getting drier and hotter. Put a wind to it. That is a change we're dealing with. So the problem is all of those changes, not just one, all of those changes create a web of change. Collectively, add fire to that, you get explosive situations that we're seeing, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, but that makes sense since temperature has risen, the hottest temperatures in those years. Santa Rosa, Gatlinburg, all of those areas, Malibu, Paradise, that's what's happening. Used to be, when I started in the 70s and 80s, we lost 1 home, 2 homes maybe, on a wildland fire. That was something. Now they're losing thousands of homes in fires. Used to be lightning caused 80% of all wildland fires. Now humans are causing 70 to 80% of all wildland fires. The changes are drastic, and we're right in the middle of that web. So, how do you fix it? What are some fixes to this problem? I would like to present that to you. When I joined Extension, OSU Extension in 2014, I came across some unique people, not only in the Extension organization, but also in Klamath and Lake County, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. We had a fire summit in 2018, last year, in March, and that fire summit was arranged by our dean, College of Forestry, and everyone is concerned about the issue, so this was put together, 30 scientists, and I had the fortune of being on one of the panels, so I was working on a panel for a couple of months prior to this, and 30 scientists, land managers, forest policy experts participated in these, and I was fortunate enough to do that. And we presented our findings the first day of the summit. We collectively put it together, and the second day, 150 people, including the governor and the senator and senators and different people, came together, and it was I thought it was a very successful summit. And some of the recommendations that came out of that summit, and some from our panel, included taking a landscape perspective, expanding strategic use of different management tools, improve coordination across jurisdiction and ownership boundaries, develop and implement cross-boundary pre-fire response plans and strategies, address inequalities with liability for cross-boundary fires, burn more, invest in data mapping, risk assessment, and applied research. All excellent recommendations. And then I remember in 2000 when I was on those fires, and it was a long fire season. The president's directive ultimately gave rise to the National Fire Plan, which ultimately gave rise to the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy. With a really neat vision, it made total sense, and cohesive strategy goals of resilient landscapes, fire-adapted communities, safe and effective wildfire response. Totally made sense from my experience and totally acceptable. So there are 2 initiatives that I would like to present to you. One proposed by our OSU FNR Extension Program, Forestry and Natural Resource Program. The other, a companion initiative and a supporting initiative proposed by the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership here in Klamath Falls for Klamath and Lake County. The 2 are parallel. I'm not going to go through all the words. You can access these, but one is by our OSU FNR Extension Program. The other is in support of that and parallel to that, but proposed by an interdisciplinary, interagency group of partners within that. And here are the differences. So, our FNR Fire Program Initiative is now Senate Bill 257 in the Oregon State Legislature. And it's called the OSU Statewide Initiative. And I have a draft on here, and it's since taken away and it's finalized. But to get my point across, this Senate bill it's embedded within this. So if you go into the 3 parts of the statewide proposal and Senate Bill 257, you'll see OSU Extension Service is one piece of it. And if you follow that and go deeper into that, you can see the total ask is for $30 million, and the Extension Service ask is for $11.5 million. Well, embedded in that is the fire resilience and resistance piece, which is our fire program initiative, which we expect will cost $3 to $4 million. So what is that? Well, this initiative, and I want to highlight just pieces of it, of course, it's building fire resilience and implementing the national cohesive strategy. So there, you know the whys. The whats, the pieces are, the first part is to develop a risk assessment for the state of Oregon. The second part is to develop high priority landscapes similar to what I'm going to show you as proofs of concept in Klamath and Lake County. So the first part is to develop a risk assessment for the state of Oregon, and I will expand on that a little bit in just a minute. The second part is to look at high priority landscapes after that risk assessment on a ground level landscape basis, and I'll explain that in just a minute. The proof of concept, which I will show you, is designed, all of this fire program is designed ultimately to educate, outreach, and develop outcomes that gets work done on the ground to make a difference. Education and outreach is the piece that extends throughout all of this, at all times, for all reasons, be it statewide, be it landscape-wide. Education and outreach is critical. The second initiative, the KLFHP, the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership Initiative, takes our OSU FNR initiative, but instead of focusing it internal to Extension, College of Forestry Extension, it hits parallel to the agencies of the partners who helped put this together. So you have implementing the cohesive strategy, taking recommendations from the 2018 Fire Summit, managing fire risks through shared stewardship, partnering to revise the Oregon State Forest Action Plan. The Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership was asked by state and private, U.S. Department of Agriculture, state and private, that help fund each state's forest action plan to put together an initiative such as this to work with the state to input into the revision of the Oregon State Forest Action Plan. That's what this initiative is designed for as a request of the Department of Agriculture, state and private. Step one, prioritize landscapes. Follow the statewide risk assessment. Step two is develop all lands partnerships. Step three, update to each National Forest 5-year plan, similar to what the Fremont-Wainema did with their accelerated landscape restoration process. Step four, all lands partnership, high priority landscapes for cross-boundary restoration. Step five, partnering to revise the Oregon State Action Plan. Step six, planning and implementing cross-boundary restoration wildlife risk reduction projects to make a difference on the ground. State fire risks. We know that Oregon State has a state fire risk. Oregon and Washington both have a fire risk already completed at a certain scale. We're not saying to do away with that. We don't want to duplicate it. We want to use that as one tool. We've already made contact and we're working with Washington State, DNR, Washington State Nature Conservancy. They put together a 20-year forest health strategic plan for their state, east side. We would like to integrate, take Stratton's risk assessment map, integrate it, add to it, and dovetail it with what Washington State did, and make a seamless cross-state boundary risk assessment statewide. And we did just a pilot project with Chris Dunn's pod analysis. I'm not going to get into that here, but that would be part of this. The landscape projects, our partnership, Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership, OSU Extension, of which we are a partner, put together a publication just published last October on the second piece, the landscape effort. And this is available free. It's in our library. There's the link. And we want to give access. It's a step-by-step process that goes through these steps. We looked at our proofs of concept, and we put the publication together to document what we did to get work done on the ground, which I'm going to explain in just a minute. We formed the partnership. If the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership was not formed already in the early 90s by far-seeing private landowners and BLM and Oregon Department of Forestry, we would have had to create it. It was there in 2014, late 2014, early 2015. We took advantage of that partnership. We bolstered it. We put it on steroids, and we got our partners together. And it's been a wonderful roundtable around which all of these agencies from NRCS, ODF, Forest Service, BLM, private landowners, industry, OSU Extension, watershed councils, Nature Conservancy, all sat around this round table, and with an annual operating budget of $1,000 and no leader, we got together and we formed this partnership. We identified a landscape in the Fremont Wainema that was NEPA ready. We conducted an intense landowner outreach and education effort. We did mapping and inventory on private land and gave us attributes to diagnose and to recommend. We supported private landowners. We did grant writing for implementation. We had agreements together. We have about 12 or 15 agreements between ODF and Oregon Department of Forestry, NRCS, Forest Service, private, and we implemented a lot of acres on the ground the first year. And we are reaping ecological, social, and economic benefits as we speak. The recommendations that came out of that publication, I'm not going to go over these in any detail, but cross-boundary restoration needs to become institutionalized within each agency. Hence, the second initiative will aim towards that. It becomes part of our official organization and common practice. You don't have to compete for it anymore. It's not exceptional. It's business. It's standard operating procedure. The key agencies must seek out and support employees who work well in these partnerships by representing their specific authorities to develop these cross-boundary. ODF should consider opportunities to build capacity to coordinate cross-boundary projects, broaden objectives. Every agency has their strengths. Every agency has their weaknesses. Every agency has their culture. We want to hit on the strongest part of each and shore up the weaknesses of each and work together collectively to get work done on the ground. Local fire districts, fire protection areas need to be a key partner when implementing CWPPs, which are the Community Wildfire Protection Plans at the local level. It's multi-level. Consider filling interagency ODF OSU extension service, fulfill the need for outreach and education. Cross-boundary projects are developed, funding is secured. Partnerships should pursue opportunities to develop markets and offset subsidies. Extrapolate this process throughout the state and beyond. Develop region-wide monitoring. Use fire as a restoration to a larger scales. And here they are. And why them is because they had a partnership. It's not a collaborative. It's a simple partnership developed in the 90s that we capitalized on and used as a roundtable, a hub around which to break down barriers and do the work instead of saying why we individually can't. We collectively said we can, and here's how we do it. And we did it. We took 2 landscapes as proof of concept. One, roughly 180,000 acre landscape north of Lakeview. 32,000 private acres, 150,000 public land acres, and we mapped and inventoried all 32,000 acres in 4 months with a grant from the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. We had a ground validator out there ground checking, and we completed it all on private land. We reached out to all the private landowners, helped them develop land management plans, worked with stewardship foresters and Oregon Department of Forestry, and we did the workshops, we did the training, we assisted, and in 6 months' time, we had land management plans for all landowners on 32,000 acres. In the meantime, the Fremont Wainema, because of their accelerated landscape restoration effort, had NEPA-ready projects, and in the first year, we had acquired $4 million in grants to implement projects on public and private land cross boundaries, and in the first year completed 20,000 acres of management, thinning, commercial thinning, pre-commercial thinning / reduction treatments, and 20,000 acres on Fremont Wainema and 6,000 acres on private land in the first year. We have 2 more years to go. And on Chiloquin in Klamath County, we started this a year ago. Same size, 150,000 Fremont Wainema acres, 32,000 public land acres, 3,000 landowners, the township of Chiloquin, 8 subdivisions. We're doing the same. We did a map and inventory. We did a risk assessment pre-plan map for all private land acres. And so far, we've acquired $2 million in grants. We're proposing $2 million more, and we're getting work done on the Chiloquin landscape as we speak. And in each landscape, we were able to look at the entire toolbox of treatments, of management. We're developing prescribed burn plans. We're developing agreements to do more prescribed burning. We're working with the Fremont Wainema. Our commercial thinning put wood in the local mill in Lakeview. We're benefiting the ecology, the communities, ecosystems. We're benefiting the economy of the community. We're benefiting the community itself. We're putting people to work as we reduce risk, mitigate risk, and increase forest health, improve wildlife habitat, and look at risk collectively over an entire landscape. We're really doing it. That's why the Klamath Lake Forest Health Partnership, and why College of Forestry Extension. Why the heck do we get them involved? They're a great group. I'm proud to be part of this really neat I'm proud to be part of both organizations. And FNR Extension, this is the group. They have a mission in the College of Forestry to learn the latest techniques in science, and then through educational programs benefit the communities. Transfer to the client groups, agencies, communities, all, foresters, landowners, natural resource managers, loggers, forest workers, non-discriminating, to bring the conduit, to be the conduit of the university to the communities. They have an infrastructure. Thanks to Jim Johnson and thanks to our program management, we have a College of Forestry Extension spread out through the entire state. We have forest agents in most counties. We have forest specialists for the entire state. Extension has been doing this for over 100 years, serving Oregon's broad diversity of learners, communities, and stakeholders. They're a tremendous group. They're all set up. If they weren't set up that way, and Washington State isn't, Colorado isn't, they're set up differently. I'm not good, bad, or indifferent. They're set up differently. If OSU Extension, College of Forestry Extension wasn't set up the way they did, we would have to do it, have to create it. They have education, they have core curricula, which has been established for years. They have programs established for years. They have education and outreach. Just 2 years ago, we started building the storehouse of fire education and outreach in anticipation of building this fire program initiative. And I want to say that the fire program initiative, as with the fire program, my great colleague Carrie Berger has worked her tail end off in building this program, and I'm proud to work with her, and she has done a tremendous job in putting the pieces and parts together the last year. And all of this is included. And this fire science core curriculum, the Citizen Fire Academy, just 2 pieces. And I want to tell you, I'm working with Steve Fitzgerald, who has been a hero of mine for many, many years. He's been working with fire and fire research and for the past almost 20 years. And this is an example of what OSU FNR Extension can produce. These papers I used as a land manager, as a silviculturist and vegetation manager since 2000 when it came out. Again, he's been working on this consistently since then, a fire and silviculture specialist. Nicole Strong, another great colleague, has been working on facilitation. The other thing FNR Extension does is facilitate, bring all the parties together. They do this. That's just what they do. They're trained to do it, and then they do it well. Max Bennett, working with Steve in putting these land managers guides. This is has been done for some years. It's nothing new. Carrie and I just accelerated it and organized it all into a fire program. Here's Nicole's publication on wildlife-friendly fuels reduction. This is just what this group does. They've come up with all these education outreach tools, and they're really good at it. And for Chiloquin, our projects, our proofs of concept, I wanted to acknowledge Amy Marcus, part of the Forest Service, Jason Pettigrew of the Oregon Department of Forestry, Leanne Bradenberg of the Klamath Watershed Partnership here in Klamath Falls, and Craig Benz of the Nature Conservancy, and Marcy Schrader of the Watershed Council in Lakeview. This court, Casey Johnson, a terrific manager we have from Oregon Department of Forestry, and so many others that made these proofs of concept happen, made these work, put that publication together. They're just terrific agency personnel that have worked above and beyond their job descriptions to make this work. For the first time in my 50 years, this has worked. And they're making progress with it. They're looking at, we'll get down to some recommendations below, but it's because of them that this can work. They made the recommendations for the 2 initiatives, as well as our FNR colleagues. I want to document really quick a need for research, and what it is, and I'm on 39 minutes. A need for research, and I want to throw out this concept, homes as fuel. Having a unique perspective of wildland and structure fire, this has been since 2014 and 2015. This has been a really important to me. And I want to tell you, the boxes of fuel, if what we need is the research to determine, say, when I worked in the 70s for Clive Countryman and those initial wildland fire behavior researchers, they did something unique with research, and they developed applicable research that helped land managers understand and incorporate the concepts of fire behavior that we're still using today. If we could do that with a fuel model for for our fuel boxes of homes. Instead of watching running crown fires sweep through subdivisions, we need to study it and find out how we can delay flashover, how we can mitigate risk to homes that are built 2 feet apart, that are built out of these fuel boxes, and what it contains in the fuel box. There's also a fire center being proposed within the OSU statewide, and I'm running out of time here, but I just want to close out with, we still need to develop a prescribed burn program. We still need to look at liability. Biomass conversion, we're looking at biochar, we're looking at prescribed burning. We need to refine the pre-plan for risk mitigation, add to it our good efforts. We need to support private landowners. We need to do more grant writing. We need to improve on agreements, and we need to implement more, much more, to reap the benefits. So that's all I have. I'm at 40 minutes, and Carrie, I went over, sorry.
Oh, no, you're good, Daniel. That's fine. We just wanted to leave a couple minutes, some time for discussion and questions. And so if you feel you've covered everything, we can move on to that portion.
Yes, please.
Okay, great. So we already have some questions that have come in. And while I'm initiating this first question, go ahead and start writing your questions and discussion items in the chat window or the Q&A window. I'll read those out loud to Daniel. So the first question here, it seems implementing this type of effort at large scale is often written off as unfeasible economically. How can we move toward recognizing that scaling up pre-suppression strategies saves us from the big cost of megafires?
So for decades, every fire I went on, and I think I've been on, I don't know how many, 400, 500 fires over that 30-year period. Every single doggone fire we looked at, we always said if we had $10 to put up front in proactive risk mitigation, proactive treatments, proactive management, for every $1 million we spent dealing with the fire and its aftermath or during, we would be so far ahead economically. And so much misery could be prevented. Sure, we need to look at the economics of doing these large landscape projects, but we need to factor in all of it. Potentially what the costs are after the event, during the event, after the event. And I'm willing to bet if that was our business as usual up front, it would factor out. Plus, there is a commercial component to all of this. We may be subsidizing our treatments up front with the assessments, the mapping, the assessments, and we can do it for $1 an acre, and we can do a statewide assessment for a heck of a lot less. But these landscape efforts, mapping and inventory, cost about $1 an acre, and the treatments we're utilizing cost a lot of money. But if that was our job up front, how much could we save? Heaven forbid if a disaster should follow that. That's how we should look at the economics, plus the commercial component, plus the biochar, plus the biomass utilization. We need to work on those to lessen the subsidies we're putting into it. But to me, the subsidies would pay for itself.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Next question, you identified many benefits to these communities to increase the pace and scale of prescribed burning and to allow wildfires to burn for forest health benefits. But the decisions are significantly increasing the intensity and duration of smoke exposure to our communities. Are we having the conversation about the benefit of burning versus the impact to human health? Everyone supports human health, but does it need to be at and I can't read the last part of that comment. Let me see. Does it need to be at the expense of human health?
So again, we need to look at prescribed burning as one tool. It's not appropriate everywhere, but it's appropriate in a lot more places than we're utilizing now. Prescribed burning is a tool, and we need to look at it under prescription. It actually produces less toxicity and less volume of smoke under prescription. It, compared to a wildland fire that produces a lot more toxicity, a lot more volume of smoke in conditions that are hotter, that are drier, that are more prone to inversions, that last longer. So again, when assessing the impacts to human health, prescribed fire versus wildland fire, we need to look at all of these attributes to human health. Which is the less impact to human health? You know, I grew up as a kid having asthma, but I went through wildland, all those years of wildland fires, never had an asthma attack. I guess it was the adrenaline, I don't know. But what it did is give me a sensitivity and an understanding of the health impacts to smoke. And believe me, if we were under prescription, truly under prescription, and we burned where we could burn under that prescription, under a solid burn plan, I think the impact to human health overall, over the entire year, would be a lot less. And it's something we could prepare for. How many times can you actually prepare for the amount of smoke produced during a wildfire season when we have no idea how much is going to burn or how wide it's going to be and where it's going to be? I just feel that prescribed burning, if it's done under a solid burn plan with solid agreements, where it should be burned, I think is actually overall less impact to human health.
Thank you, Daniel. We've got another question here. Beyond acres treated, any thoughts on other performance metrics to quantify or measure progress towards effectively treating fuels to reduce risk?
Well, there's the metrics of we need to monitor. We need to assess short and long term what these effects are. Fuel loading, we need to monitor the fuel loading after these treatments, not only to reduce from a fire risk perspective, but also from a nutrient decomposition, nutrient input perspective as well. Because fire risk mitigation is not our only objective, and it shouldn't be. Forest health is another. Wildlife habitat is another. Risk mitigation is one, a very critical one, but we have the other objectives as well, and I believe we can meet all of those simultaneously, but our performance metrics, our success metrics, need to reflect how well we meet all of those other objectives. There's some biomass we want to keep out there for wildlife habitat, and Nicole Strong's paper is a case in point of where leaving slash could be beneficial. Russ Graham, for years, did studies on how leaving a certain amount of slash for certain soil types and vegetation communities is beneficial. And so we need to look at we need to look at all of it. It's not, if you just do a risk map to do a risk map, it's not going to give you positive results on the ground. If you're just going to manage for fire risk mitigation, we stand a chance, and I know from experience, we stand a chance of neglecting the objective of forest health and wildlife habitat. All of it is really important. We need to look at all of it simultaneously to really benefit an ecosystem.
Great. So Daniel, here's a question. We're working on a local hazardous vegetation mitigation ordinance in Lake County, California. A sticking point is neighboring properties, setbacks, and individual property owner costs to mitigate. Do you have any suggestions in our model local ordinances?
Well, I think, it's going to be, what we need is solid research, solid science to feed information to ordinances and codes. I'm from Montana, and codes aren't looked upon very well, and ordinances are not looked upon very well. But if we have a solid science based on solid research from our university, and I hope we get it to the Fire Center, we should have information that would inform us on how to put these ordinances and codes together. So in slash burning, and maybe I'm misunderstanding the question a little bit, but in slash burning, it's these maps, inventories, land management plans for private landowners and agreements between private landowners and agencies and in between agencies and agencies. If we really want to start mitigating these and doing a pile burning program as well as a prescribed burn program, all of this needs to be worked out. Did I miss a piece of that question? I think I did.
Yes.
And we need to do it on a landscape basis.
Sticking point is neighboring properties, setbacks, and individual property owner costs to mitigation. Do you have any suggestions and or models of local ordinances? Well,
the cost, what we're trying to do is on the landscape effort north of Lakeview, what we're trying to do is look at putting pile burning, prescribed burning as an NRCS under EQIP and use their cost estimate and do any subsidizing as a fuel treatment, which would help private landowners a lot.
Okay. So we have something here. Do you remember approximately 15 years ago, I saw an Oregon PhD student's dissertation on a self-contained, self-propelled 18-wheeler scale pyrolysis biochar unit that produced marketable products. Does anyone remember that project?
We're working on this biochar and really trying to make it go. I was involved with John Sessions in a research project on biochar. We brought in a carbonator 500 unit to do demos here in Klamath and Lake County as part of an Eastern Oregon effort, and we have so much biomass through public and private land. We would really like to make the economics work, but it appears that we still need information on the benefit of it, on the efficient production of it, and where it's applicable and where it's not, and does it truly benefit Lake County or Klamath County or locals? Does it truly benefit local soils? Can we market it? Can a market be developed for it? There's a lot of questions. We're really trying to pursue it. The student, I haven't heard of that specific one, but Jim Archuleta and Debbie Dumrose in the Forest Service have been trying to design biochar machines, air curtain burners that will do the job for us, but I don't think it's there yet. We're trying. We keep trying for it.
Great. So on a recent webinar, the statistic was used that only 1% of wildlands fire need a fuel treatment project. So shouldn't the focus be in and around communities and making homes less flammable rather than large landscape projects?
Well, I think you could do both. And I think you need to do both. I think you need to look at those large landscapes because fires, they're going to go through communities, and they are going through communities. We're having running crown fires on these large landscapes and in the communities collectively anymore. You've got to look at both. You've got to look at, sure, where do you put the fuel breaks? We have to look beyond, we have to include structure defense zones. That's great. But now, with all of these changes, we need to look at landscape defense space, landscape defensible space. And if that means landscape treatments on, it's going to have to mean landscape treatments on public land, because 75% at least in Klamath and Lake County, and it's kind of similar throughout the state of Oregon, is public land. Private land is in and among all of that. You can't really look at a house within a community, within a landscape, without looking at collectively all of it, because that's how fire is going to spread, human-caused or lightning-caused, whatever. Anymore, you've got to look at the large landscape.
Mm-hmm. So how do you currently reach out to the public, suggest it happen on a large scale?
How do you reach out? That's why I said education and outreach is critical all the time, year-round, every activity. We need to educate. We need to do the workshops. We need to produce the materials. We need to build the partnerships, put them together. We need to highlight what's working right. And there's a lot of partnerships out there in the state of Oregon that are doing a great job. We need to highlight. We need to reach out. We need to, Leanne Bradenberg in our Chiloquin Proof of Concept landscape, Oregon OFRI, Oregon Forest Resource Institute, and the American Forest Foundation gave us generous grants and assistance in conducting an outreach blitz that did wonders for that community. We need to do it statewide. We need to do it beyond the states. We need to really look at a year-round library of education and outreach to the facets of our community that we serve as extension. And we need to keep it up. We need to do it appropriately in the schools. Carrie's meeting tomorrow with the lower grades to reach our fire program to the grades, to the colleges. We're working with NWCG on adapting our fire science core curriculum from extension to NWCG to reach out to agency personnel. We need to reach out. We need to do the workshops internally, externally, communities, adults, kids. And we need to blitz it out.
Okay, so we're just about at time, and I want to just make a couple of notes here. I just put in the chat window, again, the link to the Extension Fire Program, where you can find all of the publications that Daniel mentioned in his talk today, as well as that larger T&W publication that he made note of, Cross-Boundary Landscape Scale. That's listed here as well, T&W 707. I don't see any other questions that came in, so I'm just going to take a moment to say thank you, Daniel, for all this wonderful information and for having this discussion and answering my questions. We really appreciate your time today.
Very welcome, Carrie. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. And I also want to thank you all for taking your time to listen in today. I know everybody has busy schedules. I encourage you that at the end of this webinar, when you shut it down, a survey will pop up. Please take that very short survey. The information you provide helps us to measure impact of the webinar today, as well as it gives you opportunities to leave a comment or ask another question. and then list some future webinars you might be interested in. So with that, just a huge thank you to everybody for taking time today and listening in. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.